Welcome to week 4 of Setting the Edge podcast video show. My name is Ronnie Vaughn, and I'm joined here as always with my man Ryan Zamicelli. What's going on, man? How are we today?
What's up? I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
Not bad at all. Ready to hop right into recap a little bit of how we did last week in our picks that we had given out on the show and on our Twitter account. If you follow us at Varnar16 at the with an A, Great Zambino, and Setting the Edge _, all on Twitter. We all give out our picks. We talk during the games. We'll be live tweeting them for you guys. So Ryan, how'd you do last week?
I went 3-1 on my picks last week. Kicked it off on that Thursday night game with the Houston -7.5. Turned on the game, I think, probably at about halftime. And I just watched Houston consistently drive down the field and not get points on the board. And I think I tweeted out, like, when they were down, I believe it was like 16-12 or something of that nature. It was a score around there. I tweeted, I was like, I'm still confident in Houston because they've been driving down the field. They're just not finishing. And then 2 pick sixes and a Greg Ward rushing touchdown later. They end up winning 40-16. So kicked off the week well. Then I went with Vatech -5.5 against Boston College because I just couldn't understand why that line was 5.5. And clearly neither could Virginia Tech. And then took that Miami, Florida -3.5 against Appalachian State. I'm sorry about that one. And then
Tough one.
Texas -7.5 was my only loss of the week. Honestly, I didn't get to watch much of the Texas game, so can't really explain what happened there. It just seems like
I'll
the
pop right
offense
in. Yeah,
couldn't
it
keep
was
up.
a lot of offense. I was watching it at the bar, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The over was money. And then my buddy, who was a Texas fan, was not too happy. He was the bouncer of the bar. But it was an interesting game to watch, especially late night action. So solid week from you. Your year to date, I believe, is 9-4, and you're plus 4.6 units on the Richter scale. All of our bets are 1 unit unless we specify otherwise. Now on to my side of thing, I almost nearly avoided another 2-3 week. So I started off hot on Thursday with the Houston one, and as you mentioned, back-to-back pick sixes. I'm looking at my GameCast, flipping back between the Jets-Bills game. And it was just great for me because the Jets ended up covering +1. I thought Appalachian State +3.5 was money. Thought Boone was going to be popping, which it was. And then right off the back, Miami just killed them. Appalachian State had a long running touchdown brought back, and then it just turned into a shit show from there. That was bad. Two early games I was getting smoked. I had Florida State -1.5 at Louisville. Oops. I made that's a big Jimbo Fisher on my fault. I thought he was going to be ready to deal with Lamar Miller and those boys in Louisville, but they are now number 4. So, joke's on me for falling into that one. A heartbreaker because I had UConn -4.5 home versus Virginia. This man's under – okay, so UConn is goes up. They're up 3. Virginia storms down the field. They're going to kick a 22-yarder to send it to overtime, and I'm like, perfect. UConn wins, great for your fan, and they're going to cover the 4.5, make the field goal. And this man's Blair Walsh's the field goal. And, I mean, UConn wins, I'm hype and all, but I don't cover, so I'm a little pissed. So I start off my Saturday 1 for 2, not good. But then I had Georgia State +34.5 at Wisconsin. Barty Heisman, he got hurt. He got hurt from Wisconsin. They had to take him out of the game. Georgia State was staying close the entire game. They were up a little bit into the 4th before Wisconsin thus then pulled away. So that was cake money for me when I saw it was a disgusting 1-score game going into the 3rd and 4th quarter. So then I evened out to 2-2 there. And then 2-3 actually. And then I tweeted out late, maybe about an hour before the game, that I was all over Ohio State at Oklahoma -1.5. I saw the line bounce around from +1.5 to -1.5. All I knew was Ohio State was going to win that game if they're going to be a legitimate title contender this year. And that was money to the bank to even my night out. So year to date for me, college football wise, I'm 9-8 with, I would say, 2 bad beats, and I'm +0.2 if you're keeping track at home. My NFL record is a bit better, but we'll get into that tomorrow. So make sure you guys tune in there. Let's move right on to this week's slate of games. Initial look, I'm not the biggest fan of much, but on Thursday we started off with number 5 Clemson at Georgia Tech. They're both 3-0 here. Clemson is minus 9.5. The over/under is 58. Ryan, you have any takes for this game?
When I first looked at it, I was a big fan of Clemson because I just looked at it and said Clemson against Georgia Tech minus 9.5. That's just not enough points. And then I dug a little deeper into this, and if you look back just 1 year, you can see a situation almost exactly like this one. The only difference is at this point in the season last year, Clemson was number 11. Now they're number 5, and they're expected to go back to the playoff. And last year they were on the outside looking in until about midseason. But last year at this time they were undefeated. They come in with a Thursday night game, as this one is, against Louisville instead of Georgia Tech last year, and the line was at I want to say 5. It wasn't that much, honestly. And it was a Thursday game, and the next week they had I think they were 6th in the country, Notre Dame, that following Saturday. So like a 10-day layover until the Notre Dame game, and they didn't cover in that game. I think they ended up winning like 21-19. It was a close game, but they didn't cover. And this year you just look at it, and it's the exact same situation. It's Clemson, top team in the country, against Georgia Tech, a pretty good ACC team, on a Thursday night. And then 10 days later, they have a top 5 Louisville team. So I'm not really loving anything about this game for the spread or over/under. For those of you that at home that are taking part in that good old Draft World daily fantasy, you can get the number 1 target for Deshaun Watson, Mike Williams, at only $4.6 thousand. That's $100 above minimum price. And then also I could see Wayne Gallman having a pretty big game in this one. So I'm looking at those two as 2 guys who are able to be rostered.
Yep, I'm standing with you there. I believe the stat is that Clemson hasn't won at Georgia Tech since, I want to say, early 2000s. Don't quote me on that completely, but I know they haven't won there for a long time. Georgia Tech is 3-0 right here. I don't think this is a trap game of any sort. I think Clemson is the cream of the crop, and they're only going to lose potentially 1 game, and that will probably be Louisville or Florida State. Not much to love here, honestly. 9.5. You got to win. You got to win by 2 scores here. Georgia Tech, they're getting hyped for this game. This is the biggest game of the year for them. If I do end up live taking this game, I won't be tweeting it out till later. But right now, there's not much to love here. But I would like to take the home team, especially if it moves above 10. If it's about plus 11, I would take Georgia Tech. But right now, I'm laying off of that. Moving on to Friday, I believe there's some good games for us on Friday. Oh yeah, we have one game. We have USC at number 24 Utah. Of the top 25 games, that is. I have Utah minus 3 and the over/under sitting at 46.5. USC kind of stinks this year. If I have a lean at all, it's with Utah. I have no read on this over/under because I believe that Utah will try to slow this game down. They're not a type of team to put up a lot of points on you. They're tied for 9th in the league right now in total points against. They're letting up only 12 points per game. But keep in mind they haven't played anyone real necessarily. They had their early game against BYU. That was a gross 20-19 game. They beat a scrub team 24-0 in the first game, and they were at San Jose State and they won 34-17. I don't really have much read on this game, but if I'm forced to take this game, gun to the head, I'll take Utah minus 3, so that'll be my lean. Do you have any thoughts on this game, Ryan?
I think the records don't really indicate the talents of each team because USC's played probably the toughest schedule in the country so far this season. They played the rolling tide that won't stop rolling in Alabama, and then they played Stanford last week. Both teams are quality teams who are being looked at by a lot of people to be Final Four teams, and Utah just hasn't played a lot of talent. So I think the fact that USC is 1-2 and Utah is 3-0, I'm not really taking that into consideration much when I'm making this pick. And then when I look down Utah's just top contributors and players to watch, Tim Patrick, their top wide receiver, he gets a hefty amount of their targets when they go through the air. And I think that USC, if they have any strength on defense, it's that secondary with Adoree Jackson and Iman Marshall. And then they have playmakers on offense. Like Juju Smith-Schuster just hasn't gotten targeted yet this season because they've played elite defenses. So I think this could be a bit of a coming out party for Juju Smith-Schuster, like for this season. A lot of people most people know who he is already, so it won't be like a national like ESPN saying, "Oh, this guy's like the next coming of Jesus" or anything, because he's been around for a while. But I still think that USC could come out and surprise Vegas a lot, because this line doesn't really indicate the fact that USC has played the toughest schedule in the country so far.
I guess just to play devil's advocate here, I think it might just a little bit, because if this were a home game, it'd be -3 in favor of USC. They're predicting this to be a close game, and I like your take on Juju Smith-Schuster, because he was a boss last year, and he was one of our favorite receivers to go in FanDuel. And you can probably play him in Draft World over there if his price is at the right point. But he's only had 11 catches for 99 yards this year. He's found the end zone twice. He is. They're looking for him in those situations for the end zone. He's a very talented wide receiver. Just hasn't been able to get anything going. They played Alabama and they played Stanford, which was two great teams, two potential Final Four teams. So maybe I'm wrong on this game, and that's why I probably won't be taking it. 9:00 game on FS1 on Friday. Let's move down to Kent State at Alabama. Alabama -44 with the over/under at 50. So they're just saying here, all right, Kent State's going to get 2 field goals and Alabama's going to score 6 to 7 touchdowns. So that seems about right, but I don't want to take 44 here at all. I will not be betting this game. I see no point in betting this game, honestly. And it's not like it's a sandwich game for Alabama. They have pretty much 2 chumps coming up. They got Kent State at home, and then they're home for Kentucky before they go on the road at Arkansas, at Tennessee, and then back home for Texas A&M. 44 is a lot of points, but it's definitely not something that Alabama can't do. Do you have any takes on this game?
Not really. The only point I would make is, like, Nick Saban's notorious for not covering his week 2 spreads. Got that Western Kentucky backdoor earlier this year. But he said that the Western Kentucky game when they won by 28 was the most angry he's ever been after a loss. And with them not having a big-time opponent coming up next week, I could see them coming out and just absolutely throttling them, as a 44-point spread would say. Even if they would beat them by 43, it would still be a throttling. So it doesn't really make much of a difference there. And just the fact that even when they pull their starters, they still have a 5-star quarterback coming in after Jalen Hurts, assuming Jalen Hurts is a starter. So like that's the only tidbit of information I have stored in the back of my head, but I'm not touching this game at all.
Yeah, there's not much to like, in my opinion. I mean, if you want to maybe ride Alabama first half, I'm sure you can probably get a -21 or something like maybe even 25 along the lines of that. Not looking at it, not touching it personally. But then we're going to go into the SEC. Again, we have number 12 Georgia sitting at 3-0, at number 23 Ole Miss sitting at 1-2. Ole Miss is favored by 7 in this game. I see the over/under here at 62. What do you think Chad Kelly's going to do to this Georgia team?
I think Chad Kelly's going to do to this Georgia team what he's done to every other team in the first half. So I just think this time he gets it together for a full game. Georgia hasn't impressed me whatsoever to be number 12 in the country. I think that is just absurd. The fact that they squeaked by North Carolina, they squeaked by Nicholls, and then they squeaked by Missouri in the first 3 weeks of their season doesn't really bode well for them, to me, especially to go on the road to Ole Miss. Ole Miss they just have the talent. They just haven't pulled together a full 60-minute game. And I can't imagine Hugh Freeze lets his team go destroy a team in the first half and shit the bed in the second half for a third time in the first 4 weeks. So that's why I like Ole Miss a lot at -7 this week. I think they're going to end up being one of my picks. As of now, they're tentatively one of my picks. All my picks will be finalized. I'll tweet out all my final picks, but I like them a lot at home. Only 7 points. I think worst case they push. I don't see this game being decided by a field goal or anything less than a touchdown.
Yep, I agree with you there. Georgia is in a way worse spot in this game than Ole Miss is, because Ole Miss hosts Memphis next week, so they're putting all their energy towards Georgia this week. I think they should be able to win by 10. And if I'm not mistaken, Georgia goes on the road to play another SEC team. pulling up their schedule here now. Yep. So the next week they're actually home for Tennessee, and then they're at South Carolina. So Georgia's in more of a pit here than Ole Miss is. I like Ole Miss as well. I might be taking that with you. Also, we'll tweet that out. And it will be on the website, settingtheedge.weebly.com. Next game up on our list, a trap game for some, not for others. We have 13 ranked Florida State coming off that pitiful loss against Louisville, -5.5 at South Florida, who is sitting at 3-0. I see the over/under here at 61. South Florida has played very well this year thus far. They're I wouldn't say necessarily the favorite to come out of the American, besides from Houston, but they're up there. And Quentin Flowers is paving his path to a huge game potentially against FSU. According to quote-unquote experts in college football, Quentin Flowers plays a similar style game to Lamar Miller. Lamar Hughes Jackson.
Lamar Jackson.
I've been calling him Lamar Miller all day. I got NFL and college football up in my brain. 5.5, I feel like, is disrespecting Florida State here in Jimbo Fisher. Coming after that loss, and you have to come back into your home state and play a team. They've been solid in the past. They've been in the top 10 before. So South Florida, this is a big game for them. But I don't see Florida State coming out flat in this game at all whatsoever. This might be one of my picks. It's definitely one of my leans. I think DeAndre Francois gets his shit together. Dalvin Cook runs it down South Florida's throat. At 5.5, all they have to do is win by one score here. I kind of like Florida State. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Florida State for me this week is, as of right now, they're looking like they're going to be one of my picks. Tentatively, they are at -5.5. Little tidbit of information for everybody is Jimbo Fisher, in recent memory going back to the Jameis Winston season, he is 5-1 covering spreads after a loss, 6-0 straight up. I don't think he's lost 2 straight games at all at Florida State since Jameis. So that 5-1 after a loss covering, that bodes well for me, as well as just the fact that they're a supremely talented team against Florida State. I think this Vegas line translating it is that the general public looks at what Lamar Jackson did to them and goes, Quentin Flowers is also a fast quarterback. He'll do the same thing when he's just flat out not Lamar Jackson. And then the South Florida defense isn't the Louisville defense. And then the barrage of special teams plays along with the knee catches and everything that's just not going to happen for South Florida the way it did for Louisville last week. So I like Florida State -5.5 a lot. I'm not really sure why this line is so small. If it was me, I'd probably have it up around 8.5, maybe 9. But yeah, I like Florida State a lot in this game, to be honest.
I guess the reasoning potentially could be that both teams enter conference play next week. Florida State has to host UNC, which I guess they're voting as a sandwich situation here, and then South Florida has to go to Cincinnati. I don't really think that really plays. I think it's a sandwich game for both teams because there's an out-of-conference game, but they move right into ACC or American play directly after. So both teams are kind of looking ahead, but you can't discount this game. There's a lot of state pride on the line here. Give me Florida State. I'm actually going to chalk that in right now. Florida State, -5.5, official pick for me. Live bullets here. Talked myself into that. Another game I'm actually going to be taking here. Number 11, Wisconsin, 3-0. On the road at number 8, Michigan State. Similar line. Michigan State, -5.5. Over-under here is 42.5. Everyone saw Bart Houston, Wisconsin quarterback, go down. Barty Heisman, as some people were calling him. And then they had to bring in the backup quarterback in a pitiful game against my Georgia State team that I had covering against Wisconsin. I like Michigan State here. They just gave Notre Dame the sauce. They are a legit team. People want to say it's a 2-team contest in the Big Ten. Ohio State versus Michigan. Please don't forget Michigan State. This is the best division race in football. Michigan State's in a good spot. They're hosting Wisconsin, so they're hosting this game. This is game 3 for them, and then they go play Indiana next week. Which this is the game they're looking at here. This is a big time win for them on their home turf. Whereas Wisconsin came off that ugly game, and then they have to play at Michigan State, and then at Michigan, and then they host Ohio State. I like where Michigan State's spot here, and winning by 1 touchdown at home seems very feasible to myself. What do you got here for me?
Yeah, I agree a lot. I agree completely across the board with everything you said there. Wisconsin being without their quarterback, I think is going to be a huge detriment to that offense. I think the only way Wisconsin covers this is if it stays under that 42.5 number. They're not going to be able to outscore Michigan State if 42.5 is reached. So I also, along with Michigan State minus 5.5, I like the under because like the ways this game would go over are Michigan State just piles on the points, or Wisconsin and Michigan State match touchdowns, and it's like 21-21 at the end of regulation. And I don't see that happening. I don't see each team scoring 3 touchdowns. I don't see a combined 5 touchdowns in this game. Or even a combined 7 touchdowns in this game is what I don't see. So I like the under 42.5 a lot, along with the Michigan State minus 5.5.
Bingo. So Michigan State's one of my official picks. So I have Florida State and Michigan State for those keeping track at home, both at minus 5.5 for me. Another game I kind of like. People think it might be a trap situation here. We got Penn State going to the Big House to visit number 4 Michigan. Penn State's 2-1. Michigan's 3-0. Michigan is sitting at another hefty home line here, minus 18.5. The over/under here at 56.5. Saquon Barkley, running back for Penn State, has looked really good. He's the most elusive running back in college football right now when he's healthy. Tacklers just can't seem to grasp it at all. 51 catches, 258 yards, 6 touchdowns thus far. And Penn State's not going to run up the score, so those numbers might not seem too big, but that is a running back that can cause some problems here. And I don't mind Trace McSorley either, Penn State quarterback, but I just don't think it's enough to handle Michigan, who's I think just going to come on it. They're home again, and I think they're going to roll through. 18.5 though. I'm out on this game. I'm not forcing any picks here. What are your takes?
Last week I was fortunate enough for a Temple fan, unfortunate enough to be up in Penn State in Beaver Stadium for the Penn State Temple game. And Penn State's offense they've put up 400 plus yards of total offense, and I believe it's 3 straight weeks right now. And Saquon Barkley is just flat out the real deal. Excuse me. But I think that Penn State is a year away from knocking off a team like Michigan. And I also think if they do it, it'll have to be at home. So next year, when I believe they'll get them at home, then I think that's when you look to Penn State for the upset. If it was at Penn State, I think we talked about this earlier, this line would probably be at like 14, maybe 13.5, something like that. But then thinking about what Michigan did last week with Colorado barely not covering them. Pretty sure they missed a couple of field goals in that game and ended up winning by 17. Colorado came out and was up 14-0 real early in that game. And I don't see Penn State just coming out and going up 14-0 real early in Ann Arbor. And
No way.
Michigan, Jim Harbaugh is going to have his teams destroy every team on that schedule until he gets to his big games like the Michigan States and Ohio States of his schedule. And I don't think right now that Michigan has this Penn State team circled on their schedule as one of the teams where we've been preparing for this all year. I think this is another game where Harbaugh goes, guys, you got to go destroy them again so that we can prove that we're ready for the teams down the road. And so I could see this game being a 3-touchdown plus game in Michigan's favor. I'm leaning Michigan minus 18.5, but not confident in enough right now to make it one of my official picks.
Yeah, I have no problem with that, honestly. I was looking at Penn State's home games when the Big Ten, because they're gonna. You're definitely right about them potentially taking a big game next year. But the big game, quote unquote, for this year, they host Ohio State.
Yeah.
So that's maybe the game where we look to Penn State to pull the upset, but we'll see. I think I'm going to pump the brakes on Penn State covering. If any lean, it's probably Michigan to win by 3 touchdowns. I'm not taking it currently right now. Next game, moving back to the SEC. 3-0 Florida, sitting at number 19, going up to Tennessee. Also 3-0. Tennessee is favored by 6.5 points. And the over-under here is 43.5. Neither of these teams' offense are potent, especially with Florida losing their quarterback, Luke Del Rio, allegedly. I don't know if he's going to be healthy for this game at all. I think he's going to be out a couple weeks. Florida also has, quote-unquote, the best defense this year. They've allowed the least amount of points in the entire FBS. Do you see that happening in this game? The over-under here is 43.5, and for an SEC game, usually they're a tad bit higher. It's going to be a gross game. What do you got for me?
Looking at this game, Florida, yeah, you mentioned that their offense, they're looking like they're going to be out without Luke Del Rio and starting Austin Appleby, I believe he's a Purdue fifth-year senior.
Yep.
And then they're playing against Tennessee, who's just a team that flat out hasn't impressed yet this year. They've had multiple chances, aside from the second half against Virginia Tech, to come out and prove to people like this is our year and we're here to quote Step Brothers, we're here to fuck shit up. And they haven't done anything with it. And they've come out and they beat Ohio by, I think it was like 9, about that. And then they barely beat Appalachian State. And then they beat Virginia Tech pretty handily in that second half, but they came out and they looked like trash in that first half. So I just don't really have any read on this game because Florida has that great defense. Tennessee's supposed to have this great offense and then all this plethora of pro talent scattered throughout their roster, but it just hasn't shown that much. And then it just hinders me from saying I'm confident in anything either way. So I'm going to be staying away from this game. It's going to be an interesting one to watch because thinking big picture again, if Florida is able to come out and knock off Tennessee, maybe Florida is able to make some damage, do some damage in the SEC. And then if Tennessee is able to come out and handle Florida on the other end of the spectrum, then maybe Tennessee can prove that they're legit this year.
Yeah. As we know, Josh Dobbs was making a lot of noise towards the end of last year for maybe a Heisman run. He put on a really spectacular end of the season, and he's just looked mediocre this year. It's just looked like any other FBS quarterback that runs and throws that is good, 3.5, 4-star, but like never really got there. But that's what he's looked like to me this far. The Appalachian State game, as I was on the right side of. Then they smacked Virginia Tech, but then they can only beat Ohio at home by 9 points. Florida has only given up 2 touchdowns this year. So if Tennessee gets off to a hot start, a live bet in that game might be in your favor for those live bettors at home. All in all, I might be leaning Tennessee minus 6.5. It's not an official pick yet. I like their spot here. I like Jalen Hurd, running back for Tennessee. I think he's a solid player. And I've seen Josh Dobbs completely destroy my bets in the past when I've bet against him. And I don't want to really be on the wrong side of that. He's a very talented player. But this game, stinks, especially with Florida not having their quarterback. We'll see if I take Tennessee. It's one of my leans here, 6.5. Moving to the 6 o'clock games here. We have number 18 LSU sitting at 2-1, minus 3.5 at Auburn sitting at 1-2. Sean White from Auburn has looked all right. Leonard running quarterback, that is. Leonard Fournette, obvious Heisman candidate, has looked mediocre. Leonard Fournette thus far, in my opinion, hasn't really had that game yet. Does he have that game this week at Auburn?
I think he's subtly having a damn good year. He's still running for 5 yards a carry, and I'm not sure if I trust Auburn's defense enough. Like every year, we're told that like Will Muschamp was their defensive coordinator. Oh, he's supposed to be the solution for this defense. He comes there and they just aren't good, and then he goes off and gets a head coaching job. So I don't really trust Auburn's defense enough to stop him, and I just have that image ingrained in my mind. Like I said, an episode or two ago of him just running with 3 Auburn defenders draped over his back and still running for another 15 yards and scoring on that play. So I just don't trust Auburn's defense very much. I think this is definitely one of the weeks where Leonard Fournette could come out and remind everybody that, hey, I'm still the most talented running back in the country, and you should probably remember my name when you're listing who you like to go to New York at the end of the year.
Yeah, put some respect on my name. So they're LSU, so they're at Auburn, and then they host Missouri. I kind of like their spot a little bit more than what Auburn is. I believe Auburn has to go. Oh, actually, no. I like Auburn's spot better because they play Louisiana Monroe next week, whereas LSU has an SEC opponent coming up. Um, I don't know. I don't want to be on the wrong side of Leonard Fournette running all over this Auburn team because I remember that specific visual you had mentioned from him doing that last year. Minus 3.5 here. I don't know. Too close to call for me. 45.5 under. I'm out on this game, I think. I think I'm out on this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough spot here. There's not much to love. Moving on to our boys down in Houston. They're staying in the state, but they're on the road at Texas State, one of the worst teams in the league last year, but have sort of revamped themselves. Houston's minus 34.5, over under at 65. Ready, set, go. Where are we at here?
There's nothing really too intriguing about this game. There's Texas State isn't going to be the team at the end of the year that you look back and you go, dang, if we could have just won that one game, we could have made the playoff. They're not going to be the team that upsets Houston. But the first half line being at 21, I think there's a really good chance that Greg Ward and that offense come out and they're just like, all right, guys, don't feel like playing the second half today. Let's go destroy Texas State. And they're like, yeah, let's do that. And they just run all over them, do whatever they want for a half, go up 28-0 at half, and then sit the rest of the game. The first half, minus 21, is the only thing I'm looking at. But all in all, I don't like anything enough to make it one of my picks.
Yeah, that's where I stand here too. Definitely, I will not be taking Texas State plus 34.5. That's asking for it there, but Houston very well could just go ahead and rest their players so they do not lose a game and risk their players getting injured for their championship run potentially. They stay undefeated here. Houston minus 21 first half, big lean for me. We'll have that all those picks out on the website. Next game we have moving over to the Big 12. Oklahoma State 2-1 at number 16 Baylor at 3-0. Baylor is minus 8 favorites, and the over/under is a nice hefty 76. I like Baylor in this game minus 8. You're on the opposite side and kind of think it's a little bit of a trap. Oklahoma State, as we had mentioned before the podcast, should be a top 25 team. They have the talent to do so. And Baylor just hasn't quite put any teams away at all like they usually do. What's your takes on this game?
Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Baylor has just started really slow this year. They haven't blown out any of the opponents that they've been expected to blow out. I mean, if you look at the final score, then it's going to tell you a different story than what you're watching. If you actually get to watch any of their games against SMU, they were playing a backup quarterback and weren't able to put them away until probably about right at the start of the second half. They weren't able to put them away until then. And then against Rice, it was a pretty close game at halftime that they were able to pull away in the second half again. Oklahoma State, yeah, we said they should be ranked because on all if you want to get technical and everything, that lost game, the game that they lost, that play just shouldn't have happened. And in my opinion, I agree that they should be able to go back and just X out that one play that shouldn't have happened and say, Oklahoma State, you won the game. You're still 3-0 and you're in the top 25. And in that case, I feel like this, I don't understand quite frankly why this line's at 8. It's more or less saying that this game's in Waco and Baylor's going to get back to their usual self to me. And I just don't trust Baylor enough to pinpoint what week Baylor's going to become Baylor again.
Here's why I think Baylor becomes Baylor now. So they have hosting Oklahoma State this week, right? And then they go on the road to play the Iowa State Cyclones, which is not an exciting game at all whatsoever. That's a game that should smack them. And then they have a bye week, and then they host Kansas. So maybe within that period of time, they'll figure it out because they don't play anyone until Texas, and that's near Halloween. So this is their biggest game in the next month, pretty much. So maybe that's why I like Baylor. In my opinion, they are in a better spot. than where Oklahoma State is. Oklahoma State played a tough game against a Pittsburgh team that I really like coming out of the ACC. Now they're going on the road to number 16 Baylor, and then the following week they go home to play Texas. I like Baylor's spot here a lot better than Oklahoma State's spot. But there's no doubt in my mind that Oklahoma State is pissed off about that CMU loss still to this date. And there's no reason why they can't keep it a close game. I'm leaning Baylor -8 here. I would really like to see that line drop down a little bit with a lot of people biting Oklahoma State. If that's the case, I might bite it if it's under 7. Right now, it's a little tough for me to swallow. I think this game stays close. The over-under, 76. It screams over, so I might lean that. I'm leaning over in Baylor. I would like to see the Baylor line drop a little bit, but this over-under is only going to go up. So that's my take there. Moving on to another intriguing game. Number 20, Nebraska, 3-0 on the road at Northwestern. Nebraska's 3-0 here. Northwestern's 1-2. The line is 7.5, favoring Nebraska. Over under here at 48. Now, I'm a big playing a team at a certain time kind of guy. Like, you don't want to bet against LSU at night, at home kind of situation. And the complete flip, you flip the script. The hardest game to play in the morning, like that 12 o'clock, 11 a.m. game, is that Northwestern. Is at Northwestern. But this game's a night game, so that changes the whole dynamic. And as a gambler, Northwestern has looked pathetic this year. They lose to Illinois State, and they opened up their season with a loss as well. They're sitting at 1-2. I thought they were going to be a little better this year. Nebraska had a very solid win at home, hosting an Oregon team that could put up points in a hurry. Quarterback Clayton Thorson has looked solid for Northwestern. He just throws the ball a lot because that's really all they have this year. Justin Jackson's a decent running back, but Nebraska is a very balanced all-around team. I think 7.5 sounds good to me, honestly. And like as I mentioned right before, Northwestern home in an early morning game, I like them a lot better. But this is a night game, and I think Nebraska plays well at night. 7.5. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, with this game, Nebraska, they just look really good to start the season. Northwestern, the complete opposite. They just haven't looked good. It's not in the worst of spots for Nebraska. I'm not sure what their schedule looks like next week. Let me check.
They're at Iowa, then at Michigan State. So this is a tough spot for them. They got a bunch of big games coming up. Meanwhile, Nebraska has this game, and then they're home for Illinois, at Indiana, and then home for Purdue, which is a really, really pretty easy schedule in my opinion, unless they get caught at Indiana. So I like, this really screams Nebraska's in a great spot. What do you think?
Yeah, they don't have a really tough game coming up anytime soon. They've looked really impressive to start the year. They've won convincingly in their first 3 games. They don't have a tough game in the next couple weeks. All signs go for me with Nebraska. Like, I don't think there's a shot in hell that Nebraska loses this game. So for those of you that just want something to plug in, if you're running a parlay or anything like that, this money line is one thing that I really like this week. They don't hit the tough part of their schedule until 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks down the road when they get Wisconsin and Ohio State back-to-back.
On the road, too.
Yeah, both on the road. That Purdue game on October 22nd is one I specifically don't like as a major trap game with 2 big games coming up after that. But in regards to this one, Nebraska is not going to lose this game. I just can't see any situation where they come out so strong and then drop this one happening because all their opponents in the future for the next 2-3 weeks are the same caliber. So it's not like they're like looking ahead to an opponent. They're just getting the job done week in and week out.
Yep, I agree with that. So I think Nebraska -7.5 is one of my picks. So I have 3 official picks on the board, maybe 4 actually. Next game, we have number 7 Stanford at 2-0 on the road. It's going down the shore a little bit to UCLA at 2-1. The spread here is Stanford favored by 3, and the over/under is 46.5. Can Josh Rosen and UCLA stun Stanford in this 8 o'clock game here?
In my opinion, I'm going to go with no, simply because of the fact that Stanford has a guy named Christian McCaffrey that just does everything and then some more for that offense. I'm really big on like statistics, and I have just a file on my computer where I use it to project college football running back outcomes for a week. And Christian McCaffrey just breaks every trend that there ever was. It doesn't matter what his situation is. He's matchup proof, quite frankly. And if he isn't getting it done on the ground, he'll get it done through the air. And they're going to find a way to get the ball in his hands when the plays matter the most. And I think they'll end up coming out with a win here. I just don't see Josh Rosen being able to get enough done with the weapons that he's surrounded with. Last year, he had a good set of weapons surrounding him with Peyton and Duval, it might have been.
I think it was Duval, yeah.
Yeah, and he just doesn't have those same weapons this year. So I just don't see him being able to sling the ball around like he has in the past and in last year. And I don't see him able to pull off this upset.
Another note for your back pocket. David Lombardi, ESPN staff writer, reports that according to Christian McCaffrey, Stanford has now installed nonverbal, geez, I can't talk today, communication tools in its offense to take their show on the road to UCLA to deal with the noise that might be out there. I don't think UCLA is that hard of a place to play at. I just kind of like the position they might be in. But Christian McCaffrey is a Heisman favorite for a reason. They've only played 2 games this year, and it is a little bit of a tough spot here for Stanford because they're on the road this week at UCLA, and then next week they have another big game, a Friday night game at Washington, which is going to be huge implications. Meanwhile, UCLA has played 3 games, and then they have Arizona, and then ASU, and then Wazoo. So UCLA is in a lot better spot here than Stanford is, but I still like Stanford to win this game because if they lose, that helps me honestly because I got Washington winning the Pac-12 North, I believe. So that does help me. But I'm staying away from this game, although Stanford is in a way worse spot in their schedule than UCLA is. Give me nothing on this game. Maybe the over. 46.5 seems kind of low. Moving on to the next game. Number 3, not number 4, Louisville. Number 3, Louisville, is on the road taking on the Thundering Herd of Marshall. Louisville is minus 26.5 here. I know what everyone's saying. Ooh, 26.5 for Lamar Jackson. Seems like a little low amount of points there. But let I remind you all at home, next week, Louisville will be playing at Clemson in probably one of the biggest games of the year. So this is an interesting spot here for people that like to take first halves. Maybe Louisville comes out, just stops them in the first half and gets the hell out of there. Maybe Marshall keeps it close. Marshall hasn't really given us much necessarily to love. They beat Morgan State by 62 in the first game, but then they get smacked by Akron, 65-38. And this line here at 26.5 stinks in my opinion. But I'm taking the Thundering Herd purely off of Louisville quitting to start focusing for Clemson at halftime. Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this game, you mentioned the first half line. This first half line is one I specifically like a lot because like 14.5 is the first half line, and I just can't see like in this situation like what would 14.5 be? Like if Marshall were to cover, would it be 21-7 Louisville? I can't see Marshall holding Lamar Jackson's offense to 21 points in the first half when nobody else really has been able to do that. So I'm a big fan of that 14.5 first half line. That's one of my leans for this week. Other than that, I mean, just sit back and watch the Lamar Jackson show and just watch him light it up and watch him continue to solidify himself for a Heisman candidate spot.
Yep. The over-under in this game is at 74. So that's implying to me that Marshall is going to be putting up like 20 to 28 points potentially in this game. Louisville's got a damn good defense, as they showed last week against Florida State. But the only really thing I have to say is they play Clemson next week. They play Clemson next week. They play Clemson next week, and it's on the road. Eh, First half Louisville, lean for sure, and I'm leaning heavier on that than I am Marshall full game plus 26.5. This game could easily be just a disgusting like slobber fest, and Louisville wins by 6, and Lamar Jackson. Wow, Lamar Houston. I don't even know who that is. Lamar Jackson plays the whole. He played the whole game for all we know. You don't know. This is just one of those spots I'd rather stay away and just stick to the first half potentially. Leaning Louisville minus 14.5 first half. Last two games that are of the top 25 slate. 9 o'clock game here. We have number 17 Arkansas sitting at 3-0 on the road. Technically on the road, playing Texas A&M. This game will be played at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. Both teams 3-0, as I mentioned. A&M favored by 5.5 here, over under 49. I love me some A&M this week. Don't see Arkansas going 4-0. Don't think they're that good of a team. They lost, as you had mentioned. I'm going to take your exact quote from the TCU-Arkansas game. Arkansas lost that game 3 times before they won it against TCU. And I still don't even think they should have won that game. It's complete crap in my opinion. TCU just pissed that away. So I like Texas A&M minus 5.5. Now it'll be one of my heavy leans. Again, it's not completely booked in yet. I got like 7 leans and maybe 3 picks so far. But I like Texas A&M minus 5.5 here in a quote-unquote home game. I think Trevor Knight lights it up here. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Texas A&M's just overall the better team. It's essentially a home game. It's 5.5. Last week they were underdogs as the ranked team playing an unranked Auburn, and we all saw how that turned out. And then that game was a 2-possession game. That was a double-digit game. And then this time they're the higher ranked team, and it's only 5.5. Arkansas is not that good. They haven't proven themselves really against any opponent. They haven't played a legitimate opponent and played well against them yet. So I'm not sold on Arkansas by any stretch of the imagination. 5.5 seems like a pretty juicy line. I'm right there with you. I'm leaning towards Texas A&M in this one. There's some resounding number that I end up finding looking through this. I'll tweet it out if it ends up being one of my picks. But other than that, I don't really like anything too much. Then moving on to the last top 25 game, we got number 9 Washington taking on unranked Arizona. This line's sitting at Washington by 11 right now with no over-under listed. In my opinion, I'm just not really a big fan of this one in any aspect. No over-under doesn't really give me a good read on what Vegas thinks will happen. Just the Washington favored by 11. That's pretty accurate as what I'm thinking will happen. I'm thinking it's like around a 10-point game. I haven't been really on the Washington bandwagon so far. I guess this is their chance to really prove to me that they're a real candidate to win the Pac-12 and then maybe be that Cinderella team, that dark horse that everybody picked. So they're not really a dark horse, if we're being honest, to go to the playoff. If they end up blowing them out by 20 plus, then I might start buying some stock right on Washington. But as of now, I'm not. What about you?
I like Washington. I just don't like the spot they're in. They have to go at Arizona, which last year they beat them 49-3 at home. Now they're on the road here. But the problem is their Super Bowl pretty much is the week after, when they host Stanford. The only other games on that schedule that could be a potential ranked matchup, Oregon's not ranked right now, but they were. Utah's ranked right now, and potentially Cal. But other than that, and USC, they're talented enough to potentially be ranked. But this week is a little bit of a trap situation for them, but they probably will win here. They slaughtered Arizona last year. I believe Arizona only got better, but I like Washington this year. But for Washington to prove themselves to the people who didn't pick them as a dark horse, that comes next week. And this line just came out today. It was not available at all. There's still no over-under here. Something's fishy going on here. I forget. There's something specific that happened to Washington or Arizona in their last game, and that's why the line had to come out so late. But I'm staying away from this game completely. If you want to take, a late night game where you want to bet something while you're at the bar, take one of the not 25 games because there's really not much to love from that game, in my opinion. Sandwich game, Stanford coming up next. And that will conclude it for the top 25 rundown. Now we're going to move on to our FBS darlings, if we have any this week. So thus far, there's not been much necessarily we liked. But give me 2 games that you're looking at here that are non-top 25 teams that are of interest to you.
The big ones that catch my eye are Temple minus 27.5 against Charlotte. The reason being, I mean, you guys at home might call me a bit of a homer, being that I'm a Temple student and all, and that I was just at their game last week. But seeing their game last week, comparing that to the games of the past, it was like a big difference getting Jahad Thomas back in that offense. And then week 1, we were all over the Louisville against Charlotte bandwagon, and Lamar Jackson put up 8 touchdowns in the first half, proving that Charlotte is among the worst of the worst in the FBS. This line's only 27.5, and it's Temple's homecoming this week. So I just don't think that 4 scores is enough for them. I love the fact that it's at 27.5 and not 28, giving the 28-point win, the 4 touchdown straight up win, winning the bet. So I'm definitely leaning towards picking that one. And then my final one that I'm leaning towards is Mississippi State against UMass under 45. I mean, I've been all over UMass and Boston College since the beginning. Week 1, I took the Florida UMass under, and that hit. Week 2, I took the Boston College UMass under, and that hit. Week 3, I took the Boston College. I bet against Boston College, and that hit. So I feel like I got to keep rolling with one of them. And UMass really is the team that stands out. When I say I feel like I got to keep rolling with one of them, I'm not taking this pick just because it's UMass. I'm taking it because of everything taking into account. And then just the fact that it was UMass caught my eye. 45, I just don't think either team's offense is good enough. UMass has the worst run offense in the country, according to advanced stats and things of that nature. And then Mississippi State just doesn't have the offense required to put up a lot of points. It's a 22-point line right now, so that's saying like 32 to 11-ish, like 33 to 12 maybe. Yeah, 33 to 12 would be a 45 exactly with a 22-point spread. So I don't see Michigan or Mississippi State being able to put up 33 points, and I don't see UMass being able to put up those 12.
Yeah, I don't hate either of those picks whatsoever. The teams from the state of Massachusetts have stunk this year. The UMass offense is not what it used to be last year with Tajay Sharp and Blake Frenopel, or however the hell you say his last name, when they used to just sling it around and score like 45 points a game. Not that team anymore. They don't have a defense either, really, though. So it's Mississippi State you'd think would be able to be coherent enough to smack them around, but that's not what the over-under is telling me. But one game that really sticks out to me, East Carolina, plus 12 on the road at Virginia Tech here. East Carolina is one of the top passing teams in the nation right now. Philip Nelson is sitting at number 5 in overall passing yards. He's at 1,095. He's got 7 touchdowns, and he's looked really good this year. I believe you said his advanced QBR rating was about like an 89 or 90. That's very solid in my book. In the QB rating on ESPN here, he is sitting at 161, which is good for, I think, like top 10 if I'm not mistaken. And also, I'm sure everyone knows this, East Carolina has beaten the last 5 ACC opponents they've played, and going to Virginia Tech isn't like it's not like a hard matchup for them at all. Honestly, that's right up the road for them. I like this spot for them because they're at Virginia Tech, and then they host a stinky UCF opponent, which is going to be one of the worst teams in the American. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech has this game, and then they have to go play UNC on the road. So I like Eastern Carolina's spot to keep it within 2 scores, pretty much. I think they could even keep it within 1 touchdown, honestly, the way East Carolina has looked. We saw what Josh Dobbs did to Virginia Tech in that second half. And he looked stellar in that game. He's looked subpar really all the way around. Philip Nelson has thrown the ball 133 times. Not sure how many other teams have thrown the ball more than that. So we're in for a potential close game here. I think, in my opinion, I like East Carolina plus 12. Book it. There was one other game I was looking at. Obviously I'm a UConn fan. I'm looking at UConn -3 and minus 4.5 again, hosting Syracuse. So that's that. Ignore my UConn bias, but the over/under is 57 in that game. Under. But UConn won't score 20 points, and neither will Syracuse. But the game I'm looking at here, Wyoming -2.5 at Eastern Michigan. The over/under here is 63. I think Eastern Michigan is one of the worst teams in the nation, in my opinion. Definitely one of the worst in the MAC. I don't care how they beat. You can beat Charlotte all you want. You're still one of the worst teams in the league. They got blown out by a Missouri team that I didn't think Missouri could even score 25 points. And Eastern Michigan has to play at Bowling Green next week. Meanwhile, Wyoming has to play at Colorado State. I like Wyoming's spot a little bit better. They're known to put up a lot of points. They put up 40 on Northern Illinois, and they put 45 on, I believe that's University of Cal Davidson or something along the lines of that. Whatever. They put up 45 points against them, and then they lost a tough game at Nebraska. I like Wyoming by a touchdown. The line's at 2.5 here. That wraps up all the games that we've wanted to discuss here with you guys here on Setting the Edge. Just to run through a couple of the leans I had here. I like Ole Miss -7, Florida State -5.5, Michigan State -5.5. I like Nebraska -7.5. A lot of favorites here, Houston first half -21. I like Tennessee -6.5. The Louisville first half we discussed 14.5. You discussed Mississippi State and UMass under 45 and Temple -27. I like ECU plus 12. That's my only dog of the week, which kind of scares me because I usually like to mix it up with some dogs and over-unders. Did I miss any of your leans currently? Nope. Should be good to go then.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
All right, solid. Thanks for watching and listening, everyone. Make sure that you follow the show at settingtheedge_ on Twitter. Check out our website, settingtheedge.weebly.com. Follow both of us on Twitter. We will be putting out a little bit of insight and tweeting out our picks from the main account as well as our personal accounts. I am Vaughn R16, and he is with an A, Great Zambino. And that's all from us here today. Any last words, Ryan?
No, I feel like we covered everything pretty well. Just keep thinking big picture with your bets, like the Ohio State. If you bet them to lose on the road at Oklahoma, you were saying they weren't a national championship contender. They went in there and throttled them. Just try to keep those things in mind when everybody's at home betting on who they think is going to lose on the road and who they think is going to win and everything like that.
Yep, it's always important to keep the big picture in play. Watch out for sandwich games, and don't force a bet unless you feel confident in it. That's how I feel this week. There's a lot of leans, but I might not take a lot of them. I might only take 2 or 3 games this week, and usually I try to go for 5 or 6. But if you don't like a bet, don't force it because it's a win in your book when you didn't lose that, however many units you play on the game. But that's all from us here. We hope to hear you guys and hear from you guys on Twitter. We hope to have you guys watch our NFL podcast and video that will be coming out tomorrow, where we will be breaking down gambling and DFS slate for the NFL season. But that's all from us here. We are the Setting the Edge podcast and video show, and we hope and wish you guys the best of luck this week in your gambling endeavors. Salud.